The sound of footsteps echoed through the marble floor of the downtown bank. The sharp click of heels mixed with the muffled hum of air conditioning. Eva Simmons pushed the heavy door open, her eyes scanning the cold, corporate environment. She was about to make history, or break it. She wasn't just walking into a bank, she was stepping into the very system that had held back people like her for years. Today, she wasn't just a young woman from a modest background, struggling to get her footing in a world that wasn't built for her. Today, she was here to demand the respect and opportunities she had earned, starting with $1.5 million. But as she approached the counter, she noticed something immediately. Mark Thompson, the bank manager, was watching her from across the room, his eyes narrowing as if he had already made his judgment. The way he looked at her wasn't just dismissive. It was the look of someone who had already decided she didn't belong. "Can I help you?" Mark's voice cut through the air, a little too sharp, a little too rehearsed. His fingers hovered over his keyboard, not looking at her directly. "I'd like to speak to someone about a business loan," Eva said, her voice calm, but inside her chest, her heart was pounding like a drum. This was it. She had come this far, and she wasn't backing down. Mark glanced up at her, his expression unreadable. The cold, clinical stare of a man who had seen it all, until now. "A loan? For how much?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. $1.5 million, Eva replied, pulling the folder from her bag. "For a tech startup. I've got the business plan and financials right here." Mark's eyes flicked over the papers briefly, then he looked back up at her, the smirk creeping across his lips. "Do you have any idea what kind of collateral you'd need for a loan like that?" he asked, his voice dripping with mockery. "This isn't a charity. You're asking for millions. Do you even have the experience?" Eva felt the heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept her posture straight. "I have the credentials, the business plan, and the funding lined up. All I need is the loan to make it happen." The smirk on Mark's face deepened, and his gaze shifted briefly down to her shoes, scuffed sneakers, nothing special. Then, back to her eyes, as if he was confirming some internal bias. "Interesting," he said slowly. "But people like you don't usually walk in here asking for millions." The words hit harder than she expected. She clenched her fists at her sides, but her voice never wavered. "I've got the paperwork. Just review it, and you'll see I'm not what you think." Mark's hand hovered over the phone, tapping the desk twice, a gesture that sent a chill down her spine. "Security," he muttered under his breath, barely loud enough for Eva to hear. He spoke again into the phone, voice louder now, and a moment later, a tall, imposing security guard approached, walking with slow, deliberate steps. The air around Eva felt thicker. "Ma'am," the security guard said, eyes scanning her cautiously, "could you step away from the counter, please?" For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Eva's stomach churned, and the noise of the bank faded into the background. She wasn't just here to get a loan anymore, she was being treated like a criminal. "Is there a problem?" she asked, trying to mask the rising tide of anger and humiliation. Mark's voice was steady, almost too calm. "She's acting suspicious," he said to the security guard. "Let's just have a quick check on her credentials." Eva's mind raced. Was this happening? Was she really being targeted just because of who she was? It felt like déjà vu, a flashback to every moment where people like her had been pushed aside, ignored, or worse, belittled. Just then, Sophia Harris, a regular customer who had been sitting nearby, overheard the exchange. She had seen the whole thing unfold, and a look of disbelief crossed her face. "Excuse me," Sophia called out, standing up from her chair. "Is this really happening?" Eva turned to face the older woman, trying to read her expression. Sophia wasn't the type to get involved, not in a place like this. But today was different. "I've been coming here for years, and I've never seen anything like this," Sophia continued, her voice rising. "You can't just treat people like that." Mark's face tightened, and his eyes flicked to the security guard. "Ma'am," this is an internal matter. I suggest you mind your own business." But Sophia wasn't having it. She pulled out her phone and began recording, her finger hovering over the live stream button. The tension in the bank escalated like a ticking time bomb. And just as the guard took another step toward Eva, she made a decision. "I'll take care of this," she said, her voice sharp and steady. She wasn't about to be intimidated. Mark frowned, his arrogance now a little shaken by the quiet authority in her voice. "You don't know what you're doing," he muttered. "I've been in this business for 20 years. I know what a fraud looks like." Eva took a deep breath and slowly opened the folder, pulling out a sleek, black portfolio. "Actually, I think you'll find I know exactly what I'm doing," she said, her voice full of calm confidence. "I'm Dr. Eva Simmons, Senior Investor at Global Tech Ventures. And I'm currently conducting an investigation into the discriminatory practices at your bank." The words hung in the air like a bombshell. Mark's face went pale. The security guard stopped in his tracks. Sophia's phone clicked as she live-streamed the scene. Eva's eyes never left Mark's. "Now, let's talk about this loan." The bank was silent. No one moved. The only sound that echoed in the marble lobby was the soft buzz of the fluorescent lights above. Mark Thompson stood there, his mouth slightly open, caught in the unexpected storm that was Dr. Eva Simmons. He had been expecting an easy transaction, perhaps a quick denial, but nothing prepared him for the revelation that this woman, standing before him, was more than just a client. Sophia's phone recorded every second, her camera capturing the uncomfortable silence as the other customers in the bank began to notice. One by one, eyes shifted from Eva to Mark, and back again. The tension in the air was palpable, thickening with each passing moment. "You're a senior investor?" Mark finally managed to ask, his voice shaky, betraying his sudden discomfort. "That's right," Eva replied, her tone unwavering. "And I've been monitoring this bank for quite some time. You might want to reconsider your actions before they spiral out of control." She didn't raise her voice, but there was no mistaking the authority in her words. As Mark tried to compose himself, his fingers hovered nervously over his desk, unwilling to make eye contact. In that moment, he realized his error was far bigger than he had anticipated. It wasn't just a loan denial, he had provoked someone with a lot more power than he could have ever imagined. The realization hit him like a cold wave. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "Really? Because I'm pretty sure you do," Eva said, her gaze sharp. "You've been calling the shots here for too long, but you're not in control anymore. I'm filing a formal complaint, and trust me, this is going to go much further than you think." Sophia's phone kept streaming the live video, now with hundreds of viewers commenting, sharing, and spreading the news like wildfire. The video had already gone viral, and even local news stations had picked it up. Ryan Miller, the security guard, stood frozen by the door, unsure of what to do. He had never seen anything like this before. He had been trained to maintain order, but now, he felt out of his depth. He was just a guard, after all. This wasn't a simple matter of security, it was much bigger. "Look, this doesn't have to escalate," Mark muttered, finally lifting his eyes to meet Eva's. But his voice lacked conviction. He could feel his grip on the situation slipping away. Eva remained calm, but the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. "You made it escalate when you assumed my worth based on my appearance. People like me, Mark, we don't get treated like this anymore. And I won't let it slide." Sophia, who had been watching the exchange unfold, couldn't stay silent any longer. She stepped forward, putting down her phone for a moment to speak directly to Mark. "You can't just treat someone like that, especially not in 2024, Sophia said. "I've been a loyal customer here for years, and I've never seen anything like this. You need to be held accountable." Mark took a deep breath, his face reddening as he looked at Sophia. He had been expecting resistance, but not from the people who were supposed to be on his side. Suddenly, a voice from the back of the room interrupted the standoff. It was the assistant manager, Lena Clark, who had been listening from behind the counter. She had worked at this branch for over a decade, and she had seen her fair share of uncomfortable situations, but this was different. She had seen firsthand how Mark treated clients, especially those who didn't fit his narrow idea of what a typical borrower should look like. Lena stepped forward, her gaze shifting between Mark and Eva. She looked at Mark with a sharp expression, then turned to Eva. "I'm sorry for what just happened," Lena said, addressing Eva directly. "This should never have taken place. I'm going to personally make sure your application is reviewed with fairness, as it should have been from the beginning." Eva looked at Lena, appreciating the support but not ready to let the matter go. "It's not just about my loan. It's about the policies that allow this kind of treatment to happen. And it's about holding people accountable." Lena nodded, her face grim. "I agree. I'll make sure this gets handled." But Eva wasn't finished. She knew that this wasn't just a mistake made by one individual, this was a symptom of a much larger problem. And she had no intention of letting it be swept under the rug. "Mark," Eva said, turning back to him, "I know you're probably nervous right now, but I suggest you start preparing for the fallout. What you've done is not just unethical, it's illegal. And I'm not the only one you've wronged." As the minutes ticked by, the reality of the situation began to set in for Mark. The live stream, the increasing number of viewers, the people who had started to speak up, it was all snowballing. The pressure was building, and Mark's walls, once built on arrogance and indifference, began to crumble. Back at her apartment, Eva sat down at her desk, staring at her computer screen. Her heart was still racing from the encounter at the bank. She knew she had to act fast. The live stream had done its job, made the world aware, but now it was time for the real work to begin. Her fingers typed quickly on the keyboard as she drafted an official complaint to the Federal Reserve. She wasn't just going to file a report, she was going to make sure that the entire banking system took notice. This wasn't just about one manager, or one incident. This was about dismantling a system that had been operating under the radar for far too long. Eva knew that what she was doing was risky. People with her profile didn't challenge powerful institutions like this. But she wasn't afraid. She had spent years working her way up in the tech industry, fighting for the recognition she deserved. This was just another battle. As she hit send on the complaint, her phone buzzed. It was an email from Sophia Harris, the woman who had streamed the incident live. She attached a file with screenshots of the growing movement on social media, the online petitions, and comments from people across the country demanding justice for Eva and others who had been mistreated in similar ways. Eva smiled. This wasn't just her fight anymore. This was becoming a movement. But little did she know, this was only the beginning. The bank wasn't going to let this go quietly. Mark wasn't the only one who had something to hide. The days following the incident at the bank felt like an avalanche in slow motion. The live stream had ignited a firestorm, with news outlets picking up the story and social media buzzing with hashtags calling for accountability. What started as a single viral video had transformed into a full-blown social movement. Eva sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through endless messages and news updates. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications, comments from people all over the country, messages from journalists, and even some from well-known civil rights organizations. But as the story gained traction, so did the pushback from the bank. Eva opened an email from Lena Clark, the assistant manager who had stepped in to support her. The message was brief but important. "Eva, I've been informed that Mark Thompson has been suspended pending investigation. However, I want you to be aware that upper management is already attempting to downplay the situation. They're trying to bury this under the guise of isolated incidents. Stay vigilant. Lena." Eva exhaled sharply. She knew that Mark's suspension was only the beginning. The real battle was still ahead. The pressure to let this go, to simply walk away, would be overwhelming. But she couldn't let it go. As the days went on, more stories began to emerge. Customers who had experienced similar treatment shared their experiences, both through social media and private messages. Eva knew the bank's strategy: discredit her, minimize the impact, and hope the public would forget. But Eva was prepared for that. Sophia had been in touch with Eva, offering her support and organizing a meeting with a group of activists who were eager to get involved. The momentum was growing. The public was angry, and now, they had a voice. Meanwhile, Mark was nowhere to be seen. His absence created a vacuum in the bank, and rumors started circulating. Some employees whispered about his sudden departure, while others speculated about the full extent of the investigation. But one thing was clear: his position was no longer safe. Ryan Miller, the security guard who had witnessed the entire incident, had reached out to Eva. After a tense phone call, he agreed to meet her in person. He had been silent during the live stream, but now he was ready to speak up. The coffee shop in Midtown was packed, but Eva spotted Ryan immediately. He was sitting in the corner booth, his nervousness almost palpable. Eva recognized the expression, the same look she had seen in the mirror the night before: someone torn between doing what was right and staying out of trouble. "Hey, Ryan," Eva said as she slid into the seat across from him. "Thanks for meeting me." He nodded, his fingers nervously fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I didn't think I'd be doing this when I signed up to guard doors and check badges," he said with a half-laugh, but there was a seriousness in his eyes. Eva leaned forward, keeping her voice low. "You saw what happened. Mark, he was out of line. He put both of us in a terrible position, but you can still do something about it." Ryan's eyes flicked around the cafe, checking to make sure no one was listening in. "I'm not stupid. I know what happened was wrong. I was just doing my job, but I could see it. The way he treated you, it wasn't right." Eva nodded, relieved that he was on her side. "Mark's not the only one. It's bigger than him. It's systemic. But people like you, Ryan, people who were there, who saw it happen, your voices matter. You can be part of making sure this doesn't go unnoticed." Ryan took a deep breath, as if weighing the decision. "What do you need me to do?" "We need to make sure this goes public, Ryan. More people need to know about what's happening inside the bank. It's not just about me anymore, it's about everyone who's been treated unfairly and silenced." Ryan nodded slowly. "I can help. I'll speak to anyone who'll listen. I'll testify. I saw it with my own eyes." Eva smiled, a small but genuine smile. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The momentum was growing, and she could feel it. They weren't going to back down. By the end of the week, the pressure on the bank had reached a boiling point. Public sentiment had shifted dramatically. People were tired of hearing about discrimination in financial institutions, and they were even more tired of watching it happen without any consequences. The outrage was palpable, especially in online spaces where users had shared their personal stories of similar treatment. Eva had been in constant contact with Lena, who was now acting as her informant inside the bank. According to Lena, upper management had tried to downplay the situation, claiming it was a one-off mistake. But Eva knew better. She had already begun drafting a report for the Federal Reserve and other regulatory bodies, detailing not just Mark's actions but the systemic issues within the bank itself. One afternoon, Lena called Eva with an update. "I'm hearing whispers," Lena said over the phone, her voice tense. "They're not just looking into Mark. They're starting to look at the policies here, the ones that treat minority applicants differently. You've made them nervous." Eva's heart raced. This was the breakthrough she'd been waiting for. The bank's attempt to cover up the issue was starting to unravel. "Keep me posted," Eva said, her fingers tapping the table anxiously. "We need to push this through. Harder. Now that they know they're being watched, they'll try to clean things up, but it's too late." The investigation was underway, and Eva wasn't about to let them sweep this under the rug. It wasn't just about Mark. It was about making sure the entire banking system was held accountable. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between the public outcry and the bank's efforts to salvage its reputation grew. Eva's name had become synonymous with the fight against discrimination in financial institutions. News outlets kept her in the spotlight, and her call for accountability began to gain traction in political circles. Then came the moment of truth. Eva was sitting in her office late one evening when she received an encrypted email. It was from Lena. The investigation is expanding. They're looking at the full scope now. Mark's been fired, but others are being scrutinized too. Expect formal communication from legal soon. They're ready to settle. Eva leaned back in her chair, the weight of the moment sinking in. The legal team was ready to offer a settlement, but Eva wasn't interested in a quick fix. She wanted systemic change, and she wasn't about to let them buy their way out of this. She picked up the phone and dialed her lawyer's number. "I want the full investigation released," Eva said as soon as he answered. "No more settlements. We're going all the way." This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was a battle for every person who had been silenced by the system, for every minority who had been denied access based on a biased assumption. Eva was about to change everything. The days blurred together as Eva's email inbox flooded with messages. It was overwhelming. Requests for interviews, statements, and legal documents were piling up. But through it all, she stayed focused. This was the moment she had been preparing for her whole life. The battle wasn't just about one man, or one bank, it was about exposing the hidden injustices that plagued the financial system. The legal team from the Federal Reserve was ready to step in. Eva had prepared a detailed report of the discrimination she had faced, as well as evidence of the systemic bias that had been operating within the bank. She had included the testimonies from employees like Ryan Miller and Lena Clark, as well as the outpouring of support from those who had shared their own stories of discrimination. She was at her desk when the call came. Ryan Miller was on the line, his voice tense. "They're making moves," Ryan said, his tone low and urgent. "The legal team at the bank, they're trying to get everything swept under the rug. They've already contacted some of the people who've spoken up. You need to be careful. They're pushing hard for a settlement." Eva's grip on the phone tightened. She had known the settlement was coming. But she wasn't about to let them buy their way out of this. "No settlement," Eva replied firmly. "We go all the way. This isn't just about money. It's about changing the system. It's about making sure this never happens again." Ryan paused, then sighed. "I'm with you. I want to make sure you're safe. They've got connections. It's not just Mark, they're protecting something bigger." Eva's mind raced. The stakes had just gotten higher. But she wasn't backing down. "I'm fine. We're doing this. Get everyone ready for the next step." The next few days felt like an endless whirlwind of meetings, calls, and negotiations. Eva was in constant contact with her lawyer, who was preparing for a full investigation. The Federal Reserve had begun its inquiry into the bank's practices, and the pressure on the institution was building. But Eva knew the hardest part was yet to come. Despite the momentum, there was a growing sense of unease. The bank's lawyers were pushing for an immediate settlement, trying to take the heat off the organization. And their efforts weren't just limited to legal tactics. Eva received another email, this time from Lena Clark. "Eva. I just overheard something in the break room. The higher-ups are meeting with some of their biggest clients to try and make this all go away quietly. I think they're trying to find a way to keep their most influential supporters in the loop and make sure they stay on their side. Be careful. This isn't just about the bank anymore. It's about their reputation. And they'll do anything to protect it. Lena, *. Eva knew this wasn't just a battle against one man. This was about the culture of corruption and institutionalized bias that had been quietly sustained for years. The bank's image was everything to them, and now that it was at risk, they would fight tooth and nail to protect it. But Eva had a different plan. She wasn't here to play their game. 2 days later, Eva met with Sophia Harris at a cafe on the edge of the city. The place was quiet, but the tension between them was palpable. "I've been thinking," Eva said, setting her coffee cup down. "I've got to turn up the heat. We can't just wait for the legal process to unfold. We need to make them feel the pressure." Sophia, who had become an unlikely ally in this fight, nodded in agreement. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to take the fight to the shareholders," Eva replied. "If they think their profits are at risk, they'll push the bank to act. And if we make enough noise, maybe we can force them into a corner. We're not just asking for justice anymore. We're going to make it about accountability, and profits." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You mean go public with it? Really put them on blast?" "Exactly. But we're going to use their own playbook against them," Eva said with a determined smile. "We've got the media, we've got public support, and we've got a story that's impossible to ignore. But we need to make sure the right people are paying attention. I'm going to release everything." Sophia's eyes widened. "You're going all in. What do you need from me?" "I need you to help me get in touch with some key investors. I've already reached out to a few, but we need a bigger push. We need them to feel the heat of their own actions. Once we get the shareholders to make a move, the rest will follow." Sophia agreed without hesitation. "I'm in. Let's do it." With the pressure mounting, the bank's management was starting to fracture. The quiet whispers in the halls of the bank had now turned into full-blown panic. Eva's strategy was working. The more she pushed, the more the cracks in the bank's armor began to show. She had been receiving calls from major investors, including a few high-profile individuals who were now questioning the bank's practices. The public outcry had reached the ears of those who had the power to make real changes. The shareholders were growing restless, unsure of how much longer the bank could ignore the fallout. One evening, as Eva sat in her office reviewing the latest round of documents, a text from Lena popped up on her screen. "Eva. The board is meeting tomorrow morning to discuss this. They're going to make a decision. I'm hearing they might try to bring Mark back in if they think they can salvage his image. We need to act fast. Lena." Eva's fingers hovered over her phone. The moment of truth had arrived. "All right," she whispered to herself, taking a deep breath. "Let's finish this." The morning of the board meeting arrived like a storm brewing on the horizon. Eva had prepared herself for the worst, but today was different. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for anyone who had ever been overlooked, mistreated, or discriminated against by the system. The stakes were higher now. She walked into her office, her phone buzzing incessantly with messages from journalists, activists, and supporters. Sophia had sent her an update on the latest news. The media was still running with the story, interviews, comments, and videos about the ongoing investigation. The story was no longer just about her loan, it was about a systemic issue that stretched far beyond this one bank. It was about a broken system that needed to be fixed. Lena's voice on the other end of the phone was tense. "They're getting desperate, Eva. The board's meeting right now, and they're trying to figure out how to handle the PR disaster. They're even talking about rehiring Mark to help calm things down. They think if they put him back in charge, they can smooth things over with their top clients." Eva clenched her fists. If they bring him back, it'll be a slap in the face to everyone who's been wronged. It'll just show they're not serious about fixing anything. "I know. And they'll try to silence the people who've spoken out, including you. They've already reached out to some of the investors you've been talking to," Lena continued. "You've got to be ready for their next move." "I'm ready," Eva said, determination in her voice. "We've come too far to back down now. We need to hit them where it hurts. It's time to bring everything to light." The board meeting was underway. On one side, the bank's executives sat with their usual air of smug confidence, looking over documents and discussing how they could avoid the fallout. On the other side, Eva had assembled a team of lawyers, public relations experts, and allies who were working tirelessly to keep the pressure on. The truth was undeniable now. The public was watching. The investors were listening. And the bank was on the brink of making a monumental decision. Eva sat in a conference room, her laptop open, the live stream of the board meeting quietly playing in the background. She had already prepared a statement for the media. If they tried to sweep this under the rug, she would make sure the entire country knew what was going on. She tapped her fingers on the desk, waiting. The silence in the room was deafening. Then, her phone buzzed again. It was a text from Sophia. "They're calling a vote. It looks like they're trying to make Mark's firing a temporary suspension. They're planning to bring him back if they can get the media off their backs. If that happens, we're done." Eva's heart raced. This was the moment. She knew what she had to do. The room fell silent as Lena Clark appeared on screen. "Eva," she said, her voice shaky but clear. "They're offering you a settlement. A sizable one. They're trying to buy you off, make everything go away. But you need to make your decision now. Do you take the deal and walk away, or do you take them all the way?" Eva thought for a moment. The money was tempting, but it was never about the money. It had never been. This was about creating lasting change, about holding the system accountable. "No settlement," Eva replied firmly. "They don't get to just buy their way out of this. We're going all the way. Let the public see everything for what it really is." By the time Eva made her decision, the media was in full swing. The board meeting had ended, and the word was out. Mark Thompson had been placed on an indefinite leave of absence. The bank's decision to temporarily suspend him had done little to calm the storm. In fact, it only fueled the fire. The public wanted answers. Investors wanted answers. And now, Eva was ready to give them the truth. The next day, Eva held a press conference. The room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing, and microphones raised high. She stood at the podium, calm but resolute. Behind her, the words, "Systemic injustice in banking," flashed on the screen. It wasn't just a headline, it was a call to action. "Good afternoon," Eva began, her voice steady. "Today, I stand before you not just as a businesswoman, but as someone who has witnessed firsthand the deep-rooted biases that have long plagued this industry. The incident that began with my loan application is not an isolated case. It's a symptom of a much larger issue, a system designed to exclude, discriminate, and silence those who don't fit the mold." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I have documents, testimonies, and proof. I have the support of people who have been silenced for far too long. And I'm not walking away from this fight. Not until the system is fixed. Not until justice is served." As Eva spoke, the reactions were immediate. News stations, social media platforms, and influencers picked up the story in real time. The hashtag #BankingForAll trended nationwide. People were rallying behind her, demanding change, holding institutions accountable. The fallout from the press conference was swift. The bank stocks took a hit. Investors were worried. Customers were leaving in droves. The pressure on the executives was immense. But Eva knew that this was just the beginning. The real work had just started. She had already begun working with civil rights organizations, community leaders, and legal experts to build a coalition for financial reform. The goal wasn't just to expose the corruption, it was to change the system. To force banks to adopt fairer, more transparent practices that gave equal opportunities to everyone, regardless of background or appearance. "Eva," Sophia said one afternoon as they sat together at a cafe, "this is bigger than we ever imagined. The way the public is responding, this could change everything. The financial system, the way people are treated, you've started a revolution." Eva smiled, but the weight of the situation wasn't lost on her. This was her moment to make a lasting impact. "I didn't start this revolution. We all did. And we're not stopping until we see real change." A few weeks later, the tension in the air was undeniable. The bank had tried to mitigate the damage by implementing small changes to their policies. They promised to review their loan procedures and provide more diversity training for their employees. But Eva knew it wasn't enough. It was time for the final push. Eva was preparing for another major press conference. This time, she was bringing in Ryan Miller and Lena Clark to testify. The truth needed to be heard directly from those who had witnessed the discrimination and stood by her side. As she sat in the green room backstage, Eva's phone buzzed again. It was an email from Lena. Eva. The final vote is scheduled for tomorrow. They're planning to vote on whether to fire Mark Thompson permanently and adopt new policies. But there's a catch, they're offering you a deal to withdraw your public statements and drop the lawsuit. Don't do it. It's just a distraction. This is the moment. Don't back down now. Lena. Eva's heart raced. This was the final test. But she wasn't backing down now. The day of the board vote had arrived. Eva's eyes were fixed on the screen as the live stream of the bank's boardroom was projected onto the large monitor in front of her. Every word spoken by the executives was scrutinized by hundreds of viewers, each more invested in this moment than the next. Eva wasn't at the meeting herself, she had made it clear that she was no longer negotiating with the bank. Her team, her lawyers, and her supporters were ready for whatever the bank had planned. This wasn't just about settling a dispute anymore. It was about exposing the system and demanding real change. Lena had provided a report on the most recent developments. The bank was prepared to vote on whether Mark Thompson would be permanently terminated and if their internal policies would change, including the implementation of new transparency measures for loan approvals. But there was one catch. They were offering Eva a settlement to pull back her public statements and abandon the legal action. Eva had thought long and hard about what this meant. The offer was tempting, it would guarantee her financial security and keep her out of the legal limelight. But at what cost? She wasn't in this fight just for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had been systematically discriminated against, for every voice that had been silenced by institutions like this. No. This wasn't the time to back down. As she sat in her apartment, watching the meeting unfold on her laptop, the weight of the moment hit her. The executives in the room were trying to regain control of a narrative that had gotten out of hand. They were playing a dangerous game, one that Eva was determined to win. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, the chairman began, his voice smooth but nervous. We are gathered here today to address a serious issue, an issue that has tarnished the reputation of this esteemed institution. Eva's fingers curled into fists. This wasn't about saving face, it was about accountability. The meeting continued, and it was clear that the bank was attempting to frame the conversation in a way that made them look like they were taking action. But Eva wasn't fooled. The more they spoke, the clearer it became that they were more concerned with optics than real change. We are committed to reviewing our internal practices, one of the senior executives said. But let's not forget, this is a situation caused by one employee's actions. Let's not paint the entire organization with the same brush. Eva scoffed quietly to herself. It wasn't just one employee. It was an entire system of biases that had been allowed to fester unchecked for years. As for the matter of Dr. Simmons, the chairman continued, we are prepared to offer a settlement to resolve this quickly and quietly. We understand that she has made significant claims, but we believe this can be handled without further public disruption. Eva's heart raced. She had prepared herself for this. This was their final attempt to sweep everything under the rug. But she had other plans. She clicked on her laptop, hitting send on the email that would change everything. It was a letter addressed to the Federal Reserve, the Department of Justice, and several key journalists who had been following the story. The email hit the press like a bombshell. Within hours, it was everywhere, mainstream media, social media, and even political circles. Eva's letter didn't just reject the settlement offer, it exposed the entire process. She had gathered all the data she had worked so hard to compile, including documents that showed systemic discrimination within the bank's loan approval process, and she was making it public. The bank's stock plummeted as investors scrambled to react. The CEO issued a statement trying to downplay the situation, but it was clear that they had lost control. The news outlets were relentless, broadcasting every detail of the ongoing investigation. Eva, meanwhile, had prepared for a response. She was going on the offensive now. She wasn't going to let the bank recover from this. She was making sure the entire country knew how deep this ran. "This isn't just about me," she said in an impassioned live-streamed speech later that day. "This is about a system that has been built on discrimination and exclusion. And today, we are tearing it down." Eva's words reverberated across social media. She had the support of thousands, maybe millions, of people who had shared her story or related to her struggle. The message was clear: this was no longer just a fight against one bank. This was a fight against an entire industry that needed reform. The pressure was mounting. Within 48 hours of Eva's public statements, the Federal Reserve had launched an official investigation into the bank's discriminatory practices. The Justice Department was also looking into the claims of systemic racism. It was only a matter of time before other institutions followed suit. And then, the inevitable happened: the board voted. The decision was as Eva had hoped. Mark Thompson was permanently fired. The bank was forced to publicly admit its failure to address discrimination and pledged to overhaul its policies and practices. The settlement offer was officially rescinded. But this was just the beginning. Eva had set the stage for much larger reforms. Her victory wasn't just personal, it was societal. The victory wasn't just about holding the bank accountable. It was about proving that one person could make a difference in breaking down a system of inequality. Eva stood before a crowd at a press conference the following week. The weight of what she had just accomplished hung heavy in the air. The national conversation about discrimination in banking had begun, and she was at the forefront. "Today, we celebrate a victory, but tomorrow we get to work," Eva said, her voice ringing with strength. "This is not a one-time battle. This is a long-term fight, and we will not stop until the entire financial system is held accountable. We will not rest until every person, regardless of race, gender, or background, has the same opportunity to succeed." The crowd erupted in applause. In the months that followed, other financial institutions began to review their policies. Eva's name became synonymous with a new wave of reform. She worked with policymakers, organizations, and activists to ensure that the fight for equality in finance went beyond her case. Eva walked through the doors of a new office space, her vision for a diverse and inclusive financial firm finally taking shape. The fight was far from over, but Eva had changed the game. She had made sure that the voices of the oppressed were no longer ignored. The bank that had tried to crush her had now become a symbol of what could happen when the truth was exposed. Eva knew the road ahead would be long, but she had learned that with enough courage and conviction, anything was possible. And with the people behind her, she knew she would never back down. Eva's victory had shaken the financial world, but she wasn't about to rest on her laurels. The momentum was building, and she was ready to use it. In the aftermath of the bank's public reckoning, the conversations surrounding systemic issues in the financial industry were no longer whispers. They had turned into a roar, and Eva was at the heart of it. The day after the announcement of Mark's permanent firing, Eva was invited to speak at a major financial reform conference in Washington, D.C. She knew this was a pivotal moment, not just for her cause but for anyone who had ever felt powerless against institutions that protected their own. As she stood backstage, reviewing her notes, she received a call from Sophia. "Eva, we've got something big," Sophia said, her voice tinged with excitement. "I've been talking to some people, and we've got an opportunity to form a coalition, real change in the financial sector, not just talk. There's a group of investors and reform advocates who want to back you." Eva paused, taking in the weight of the offer. "How serious are they? I don't want to get caught in another cycle of empty promises." "I'm telling you," Sophia replied, this could be the start of something huge. They're looking at long-term changes. Think about it, if we get the backing, we could create a fund dedicated to supporting minority-owned businesses, revamping how loans are distributed, and pushing for more diversity in the industry. This could change everything. Eva felt a wave of energy rush through her. This was bigger than just getting one person fired. This was about reshaping an entire sector. "I'm in," Eva said. "Let's make this happen." The Financial Reform Conference in D.C. was the perfect platform to announce the new coalition. Eva took the stage with a sense of purpose, her heart pounding with anticipation. The crowd was a mix of policymakers, corporate leaders, and activists. They had all come together, hoping to find solutions to some of the most pressing issues in the financial sector. Her speech began with a brief overview of her personal story, how it had unfolded into a nationwide conversation about racial inequality in banking, and how the fight was not over. "Today, we stand on the edge of something transformational," Eva said, her voice strong and steady. "This is not just about a loan application that was wrongfully denied, or about a manager who let his prejudices dictate his actions. This is about the systems that allow that to happen, the policies that reinforce it, and the institutions that turn a blind eye. We're not just here to ask for change. We're here to demand it." The room was silent, hanging on every word. Eva could feel the shift, the collective energy that rippled through the crowd. This was the turning point. "I'm proud to announce that we're forming the Financial Equality Coalition, a movement that will ensure fair access to financial services for all. We're going to tackle the systemic problems that have held people back for too long." Eva's announcement was met with applause, but the real work had just begun. The coalition included investors, activists, lawyers, and former financial executives who were all committed to reform. They had one goal: to use their collective power to change the way the financial industry operated, making it more equitable and transparent. Despite the overwhelming support for the coalition, not everyone was convinced. Eva knew that the real battle was only beginning. The financial industry was huge, and it wouldn't change overnight. There were going to be obstacles, and there were going to be people who tried to stop her. One afternoon, as Eva was meeting with her new allies, she received an unexpected call from Lena. "Eva, there's something you need to know," Lena's voice was serious. "I've been hearing some things from inside the bank. They're not going down without a fight. There's talk of other institutions launching their own diversity initiatives, but they're just trying to placate the public. They're making it look like they're taking action, but it's all surface level." Eva's heart sank. She had expected resistance, but the lengths to which these institutions would go to protect their interests were more insidious than she had anticipated. "I knew this was coming," Eva said, her voice steady. "They think they can fool the public with a few token changes. But we won't let them get away with it. This is bigger than that. It's not just about getting them to say the right things. We need to make sure they actually change." Lena agreed. "I'll keep you posted if I hear anything else. But we need to stay ahead of them. You've got the public's attention now. Don't let them twist it." The next few months were filled with strategy sessions, press conferences, and meetings with policymakers. Eva's new coalition had its first major victory when Congress agreed to introduce new regulations requiring greater transparency in loan approval processes, especially for minority applicants. It was a step in the right direction, but Eva knew it wasn't enough. She pushed for even bolder reforms: mandatory diversity audits for financial institutions, the creation of a federal fund to help minority entrepreneurs, and stricter penalties for discriminatory lending practices. But even as Eva's influence grew, there were still those who tried to undermine her efforts. Ryan Miller, who had been instrumental in her early fight, called her one evening with troubling news. "Eva, I'm hearing that some of the people you're working with, people in the coalition, are being pressured by others in the industry," Ryan said. "There are whispers that some of the investors want to water down your proposals. They don't want to make waves." Eva was silent for a moment. She had known that some of these people might not have the same level of commitment to real change, but hearing it confirmed stung. "I'm not backing down, Ryan," she said, her voice resolute. "This is bigger than anyone's personal interests. If they're not on board with real change, then they can get off the train. This is about accountability, not profit." Ryan's voice softened. "I'm with you. I've got your back, no matter what." The coalition's next big move was a public showdown with the major banks. Eva had spent months preparing for this moment, compiling evidence, gathering testimonies, and building a case that could not be ignored. On the day of the public hearing in Congress, Eva stood before the committee, flanked by members of the coalition, prepared to make her case. "What we've seen is not just discrimination, it's a system designed to keep people from succeeding. To make sure certain people never get a seat at the table. But today, that changes. Today, we are holding these institutions accountable, and we will not rest until the system is dismantled and rebuilt to work for everyone." Her words were powerful, and they resonated with the committee members, the media, and the public. In the end, the reforms Eva fought for were passed. The financial industry was forced to adapt, and slowly, changes were made. Transparency became a standard, diversity was no longer optional, and fairness was finally at the heart of how loans were distributed. Months later, Eva walked into the headquarters of her own new financial venture, the Fair Loan Fund. The fund was designed to support minority entrepreneurs, providing them with the resources and access to capital they had been denied for so long. As she sat down at her desk, Eva looked out the window at the city skyline. The fight had been long, and there had been countless moments of doubt, but it had all led to this. She had changed the game, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been left behind. Eva knew the work wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to smile. The future was brighter. After the new regulations passed and the financial landscape began to shift, Eva found herself at a crossroads. Her journey had started with a simple business loan application, and now she was leading a movement that had reshaped the very fabric of the banking industry. But despite all the victories, there was still more to be done. She sat in her office, looking over the reports on the new policies. The impact was undeniable. Banks were now required to implement diversity audits, minority applicants were being given a fairer chance, and the public was more aware of the biases that had been so deeply ingrained. But Eva knew that these changes, while monumental, were only a beginning. Her phone buzzed, pulling her back to the present. It was Sophia. "We did it," Sophia's voice echoed through the speaker. "The new funding programs for minority businesses are already making an impact. We've got over 100 small businesses receiving loans that would have been impossible just a year ago." Eva smiled, but the weight of the long-term work still pressed on her. "It's just the beginning, Sophia. We've changed the law, but we need to make sure these changes stick. We need a new generation of leaders, a new way of thinking about wealth and opportunity." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "You're right. But you've already made history. It's hard to believe this all started with one decision to stand up for yourself." Eva leaned back in her chair, reflecting on how much had changed. She had turned her personal fight for fairness into a movement that had affected an entire industry. But she wasn't stopping here. Months passed, and the changes Eva had set in motion began to take root. Her new initiative, the Fair Loan Fund, had grown beyond her wildest expectations. Entrepreneurs who had previously been sidelined by the system were now thriving, launching businesses that were not only profitable but also vital to their communities. One afternoon, Eva found herself in a meeting with a group of young, passionate entrepreneurs. They had come to seek funding for their businesses, each one bringing a unique vision to the table. "Eva, what you've done has changed everything," said one of the young women at the table. "We were told we couldn't succeed, that we didn't have access to the right resources. But now, we have the chance to prove everyone wrong." Eva smiled, her pride evident. "I didn't do this for you to just prove people wrong. I did this so you could prove to yourselves what you're capable of." As the meeting continued, Eva thought about all the faces she had met along the way, the people whose lives had been touched by her fight. She had always believed in the power of the individual to make a difference, but now she knew that it was the collective strength of people coming together that could change the world. Despite the progress, Eva knew there were still powerful forces working against true change. Behind the scenes, some of the largest banks were already working to find loopholes in the new regulations. They were playing a waiting game, hoping the media's attention would shift and the public's focus would fade. Eva could feel the weight of this challenge pressing on her. It wasn't enough to have laws in place, they needed to be enforced consistently. The battle was far from over. She needed a new strategy. She reached out to Ryan Miller, her trusted ally who had been by her side from the very beginning. "Ryan, we've got work to do," Eva said, her voice steady. "The banks are already planning their next move. We need to make sure these new policies aren't just paper changes. We need to hold them accountable, or everything we've fought for will be meaningless." Ryan, now more confident than ever, responded without hesitation. "I've got your back, Eva. We'll make sure they can't undo this." Together, they began planning their next move, focusing not only on holding the banks accountable but also on ensuring that the changes would be felt on a grassroots level. It was time to move from policy to action, and Eva knew this would require more than just advocacy, it would require mobilizing the people to demand real, tangible changes in how banks operated. The movement had grown, and the time had come to make one final push. Eva knew that with every victory, there were still challenges that could undo the progress they had made. She began traveling the country, speaking with local communities, ensuring that they understood the changes and how to access the new resources. She wanted people to see that these changes were for them, that their voices mattered in the grand scheme of financial equity. One evening, at a community event in New York, Eva stood before a packed auditorium. The energy in the room was electric, people eager to learn how they could make a difference and demand fairness in their own communities. "We have come so far, but the fight isn't over. We've started a revolution, but now it's up to all of us to keep it going. The work we've done here is just the beginning." Eva's words resonated with the crowd. They were ready for the next step. They were ready to take this fight into their own hands. Years later, Eva stood on the steps of a new initiative she had launched, a national network of financial institutions dedicated to supporting underrepresented communities. This was her legacy, not just the changes she had forced through, but the new generation of leaders she had helped cultivate. She looked out over the crowd, a sense of fulfillment filling her heart. The fight had been long, and there had been countless obstacles. But in the end, the system had been changed, not by one person alone, but by the collective effort of many who had refused to accept the status quo. As she watched the first group of young entrepreneurs walk into the building to receive their funding, Eva knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. It wasn't just about her story anymore, it was about the future. Eva's phone rang just as she was leaving her office late one evening. It was Sophia, still by her side after all these years. "Eva, you've done it. You've changed the game. The next generation is already taking over. This thing you started, it's unstoppable now." Eva smiled softly. "We've all done it, Sophia. And it's not over. Not yet." As she walked out into the city, the sun setting behind her, she thought of everything that had come before, the struggles, the setbacks, the wins, and the people who had stood by her side. Change was possible. And it had all started with one person refusing to stay silent. The fight wasn't over. But for now, Eva knew she had done what she set out to do. And that was enough.